without even looking at schools, you have to do the GMAT because the GMAT kind of puts you or puts buckets out there, in which you can fit and assess schools in. If you think that you freeze up or, you're just not able to go beyond the timer, I would just say GRE has a much more friendlier testing criteria. If you want to work in consulting, 99%, 95 to 99% of jobs, consulting jobs in Italy require uh, proficiency in the Italian language. I'm currently an MBA student at Stabaconi in Milano, Italy. By profession, I'm a chartered accountant with over 8 years of work experience in financial services as well as entrepreneurship.
Because an international experience is so wide, how did you narrow down on you wanted to study in Europe, or did you have a particular preference that you wanted to study in Bocconi, or how did you identify which country you wanted to go to and which schools were you looking at?
So that's a very important question to consider before anyone applies for the MBA. So they were inherently two geographies that I focused on, the US and Europe. Asia, I sort of thought that, we've sort of been in that region, so I would not find so much of a difference. So I didn't focus too much on Australia and Asia very, very intensely. And I looked at US and Europe as the primary regions where I actually looked at schools and evaluated them. Like anyone else, I started with a ranking and started networking with people studying in those schools to understand their experiences. One of the important factors about or in favor of Europe was that the programs are shorter, they're relatively cheaper compared to the US schools, and third of all, the visa norms I think was the biggest factor that attracted me to Europe versus US because it takes forever to get a working visa, and they are just every 3 years there were issues about anyone I heard from my school, who was in the US, they were just worried about their visa all the time. So I knew that I didn't want that experience for myself, like constantly living under this threat that there's a lottery system and I just might be thrown out of this country. And why did I work so hard? And you're not going to get that return on investment when you're in your home country. So that was just a very powerful thought that pushed me more and more to look at European schools. Within Europe, I concentrated, on the on schools in the UK as well as, in Europe, which is like France, Spain, or Italy. Um, the main attraction about Bocconi for me was the small cohort size. We have a cohort size of 113 students, which is the largest batch that they've had in I don't know many years. They usually have a sub 100 sort of class size, and that gives you a very personalized experience. We have two sections of 50 students each, and the kind of individual attention that you get from faculty or the kind of friendships you make in that setting is completely different from having a batch size of 800 where by the end of the program you don't even know some of them, you've not formed those bonds, and you've not shared as much as you wanted with you'll do with 20 people, but when it's 100 people class size, the relationships you form are completely different. The best learning in an MBA really happens from your peers, and that is something that I wanted to make the most of during the program. So I think that was really one of the things that stuck out. Another reason why I favored Bocconi was that it is so flexible in terms of the program itself is so flexible because it is the 15 months are divided into 9 months of coursework and 6 months of customization. You can decide to structure the 6 months as per you. Typically people do an internship for the first 3 months and do an international exchange for the next 3 months, but it's up to you. You can do an entrepreneurial project. You can choose to start working full time. You can choose to travel the world. It's completely up to you on how you kind of want to, gain skills that best fit your choices.
It's a very small cohort, and I'm reminded of my experience at the Young India Fellowship, where I was in a cohort of 97 students, and I personally know everybody. So I can
Yeah,
relate to this aspect of, being in a smaller group, you definitely get more attention, and it makes sense to sort of consider a school based on its class strength. You mentioned the visa process. Can you tell me more about what the visa looks like for European schools?
yeah. So in Europe, after you complete your program, you get a 1 year visa to look for jobs or have a job. So you are here for 1 year without any concern or stress. After that 1 year, once you find a job, you can get a 3 year visa. So essentially, you are on that visa for 3 years. So you renew your visa once, and once you renew it for 3 years, there are some norms in terms of that you can't change jobs, or you need to have a very small transitory period. Like there's a little bit of restriction involved in the first time you get a work visa, but the second time that you renew that visa, it's completely flexible on how many times you want to change your job, etc. Getting a sponsor for your work visa is the hardest part, uh, of being in Europe. So maybe that finding a job part is difficult. But once you have a job, it's equally um, difficult for the employers to throw you out. So it's like once you make it, you've made it. Like you're gonna like get the job you want, or it's very easy also because you can work choose to work in any other European country too. Although we do, it is, I'm not very sure about this. So with Italy, I will the visa that I get, the 1 year period that I get, I am okay to travel to any other European country, but I can't like work there unless I get a sponsor. But in Italy, I can stay for an entire year without a job, and there are no restrictions on traveling through the Schengen area, none of those things. So, one important thing about Europe is that the European countries are so dependent and they are so interlinked with each other that mobility throughout Europe is very easy. So, think about it like a giant union that, you know, um,
Yeah,
that
I
is
mean,
for your that serves you, and you can it's very, in the sense, you have a huge basket to choose from, and once you come to Europe, you realize that which country is good for you based on the tax, incentives, based on languages and stuff like that. So you kind of figure it out because it's divided a little bit about also the skills that are required in different countries. So you kind of figure it out, and I think 1 year is a huge amount of time that they give, because usually within 3 months you're able to get something, or at least start interning somewhere, and while the internship is on, you can look for jobs. So it's never happened that, of course, if you take out COVID and that was an externality, but it's not been something like you don't get a job, and there's nothing like a lottery thing that.
I understand this, and you've touched upon so many aspects that I wanted to cover, such as language, culture, and how different countries varies. But just to break down the visa bit,
Yeah,
so comparing Europe with the US, in the US, if you opt for an MBA program that is a STEM program, then you get a 3 year visa automatically with your student visa. But after the 3 years get over, it becomes a challenge because you definitely need a sponsor to sort of apply for your H1B. And the challenge in American schools is that, say, in an average MBA school, if you come on campus, it's only 30 to 40% employers that are willing to sponsor international visas. So the number of companies that one can apply to while being on campus gets restricted significantly because the first shortlisting criteria is whether they will sponsor my visa or
yeah,
not. And then
yeah,
once you are working for them, then you have to get into the lottery queue. So that's really the US system, and it's overloaded, and there are lots of challenges there. And then comparing this to the US, sorry, to the UK. In the UK now they're offering 2 years visa for students who've definitely studied in the UK, but even for international students who have graduating from, say, I think it's the top 50 or the top 100 institutions. So
So the UK visa was became flexible the year I was applying, and the rush to UK schools was just insane because Indians really look for easier visa norms, because you need that clarity as to, where am I going to work? Because, it's a considerable amount of investment that you're putting in the program, plus living, plus, opportunity cost that you've foregone to be in that school. So it is a very, very important criteria. And I think another two reasons in the favor of European school is first the international diversity. Um, in the US, you have 33% representation of international candidates across the world. Whereas in my class, we are 70% from outside Italy, and I think 50 plus from all over the world outside the EU in general. So I think the kind of element that adds to any class discussion is just incredible because you hear opinions from all over the world, from industries. There's a helicopter pilot in my class who's lived in in the Antarctica region for I think 2 years or something, and that's just not something you get to hear about or even think about, on any other day. And
so let's talk more about Bocconi. So you're sitting in Milan, and clearly it's the fashion capital. But if you can, and Bocconi has three campuses from what I learned on the website. There's one in Rome, and then they also have an Asia center in Mumbai. Uh, Comparing the location and talking more about, say, what the school specializes in and how you should consider what campus you want to be on, vis-a-vis, say, also some other schools in Europe. So, say, for instance, the ones in Spain, or you have France, you've got Switzerland. What are the areas of specialization? Say, if you want to be in this region, this is what you can hope to gain from this school. If you can just break it down, because you're sitting in Europe, you're probably seeing it more closely.
starting off with Bocconi, we have three campuses, but it's divided very clearly on the basis of courses offered. So Milan, which is their original and oldest campus, has the MBA, is the only campus that offers the MBA program. Like there's no choice. It's like a full-time course at the Milan campus. The Rome campus is relatively new and it offers mainly executive courses, um, but it doesn't offer as many courses as the one in Milan. And the area center largely focuses on a few master's programs, but very centric to the India market. But they give you a 3 month exchange where you come to the Bocconi campus in Milan and actually get to experience um, the life on the Milan campus. Comparing Bocconi across other business schools in Europe, I will say that there's a very healthy competition between schools, and there's a whole lot of collaboration that happens between AGC, ESA, ISADE. You have competitions um, that happen, case competitions, for example, if there is like sports competition. The element that Bocconi has uh, unique compared to other schools is the entrepreneurship element, which I think ISADE does offer to a certain degree. But Bocconi is very entrepreneurial in the school that it is. The opportunities that you get, career opportunities that you get after Bocconi are like any other school, like consulting, tech, and financial services. But there's a large element of um, luxury, fashion, and retail that you are placed in um, versus any other business school in Europe. So if and every school has its own set of differentiation. ESA is largely consulting based, so you have a lot more people going into consulting right after ESA, and they also have a focus now are building a focus on entrepreneurship. Same is the case with ETC. They really support entrepreneurs. They have an innovation and support for entrepreneurs in some way. I've heard of people from previous cohorts who have just expressed their interest to join a particular company to the faculty, and they have been able to connect you because they have such great industrial connections. So I think that is really the key factor that I'm trying to bring out. It's everything that you want to do, and nothing can stop you if you are really determined to get it.
While you were talking about these case competitions, I was reminded of my time at Harvard. So Harvard has this really famous Harvard versus Yale football match that happens every year. And it's almost like a religion. People treat it so seriously. There are these pre-game events, post-game events, and then they alternate it. So when I was there, it was on Harvard's campus. This year it's on Yale's campus, and these competitions are like real, and you just get a sense of what each school stands for. So I can very well imagine imagine what may be happening there. uh, Tell me more about, say, the language barrier. Is there a language
Yeah,
constraint, especially in an MBA program or while looking for job opportunities? Or, I mean, are you upskilling
yeah,
yourself, learning a new language?
yeah. Again, very important consideration. So I entered Italy, and people around me were just talking in Italian. So it can seem a little mind-boggling if you don't learn the language. I think be prepared to learn the local language if you're coming. I am on the third level of Italian, which is a B1 level. And I'm doing it to enrich my own experience. Having said that, the course is taught entirely in English. Within the Bocconi campus, you don't feel so intimidated by people speaking in Italian because everyone knows English and converses in English. Um, the course is taught in English, your classmates talk in English, so you don't really feel out of place. But yes, outside the campus, it is really the first language they speak. I have seen instances outside Milan where people don't even understand a word of English, so you have to talk in Italian, but not so much in Milan because it's sort of like the most international city that Italy has. Um, Coming to opportunities outside the MBA program, yes, I would say your career opportunities are limited if you want to get into consulting in the Italian job market because clients speak in Italian, and you have to sit in those meetings and be able to understand what they are saying, and sometimes be the only person working on that project. So you have to have a C2. You have to have a full proficiency in the language if you want to work in consulting. 99%, 95 to 99% of jobs, consulting jobs in Italy require uh, proficiency in the Italian language. However, there are a lot of opportunities that you can apply for that don't require um, Italian. Wherever there is an international team, something like an Amazon or any other company that you can think of that has an international team where English is really the only language they talk in. I think you're not going to have any issues there. Having said that, they do provide language classes on campus just to make your experience richer. And I think I've been learning Italian for over a year now, and I think it it's just a very exciting sort of element, to the program. I don't really need it for like a job per se, but I kind of want to be able to talk another language. I think that's just something that I want to do at a personal level too. There are other Indians and other people from international locations that don't have any plans of learning the language, and it's very hard to do it in a short span of time. So they're like, why should we even start now? So it is completely an individual choice, but I chose to do it. And I would say a lot of people, because Spanish is very similar to Italian, so it's very easy for them to pick up the local language. And some people have Italian connections or affiliation, so they are very well um, aware of the language, even if they don't live in Italy. So you find a whole range of people who are, you know, interested, not interested, but at the end of the day, it's completely your choice and depending on the sector that you want to get into. Because if consulting is the first choice in the Italian market, um, it's not a choice. You don't have a choice to not learn the language.
And also, your school offers the flexibility of choosing whether you want to study the language or not. But then you have other schools such as HEC, or sorry, INSEAD, that makes it mandatory for students to have a
Yeah,
third language before they
yeah.
graduate. So, again, that can be a criteria to assess what school you want to go to. And